In the quiet town of Atchison, Kansas, there stands a house that people do not forget about once they see it. From the outside, it looks pretty plain, just another small home on a quiet street. But behind its walls, stories have grown that send chills across America. Except in North Alabama. I don't know. Anyways, this place is called the Sallie House, and many believe it is one of the most haunted homes in the country. Over the years, visitors have reported shadows that move without reason, whispers that come from empty rooms, and scratches that appear on skin with no one touching them. Families who have lived there say that they were pushed, frightened, and even changed by something they could not see. What makes this story more unsettling is how ordinary the house looks, as if danger and mystery are just hiding in plain sight. Which actually, most dangers are hiding in plain sight, just as a heads up. Today, we will talk about the Sallie House and explore the puzzling mystery behind it. Long before the Pickmans ever set foot inside, the house already carried shadows from the past. Built in the mid-1800s by Michael C. Finley, it was meant to be a simple family home. Also, I just want to point out, if anybody here knows Junkyard Diggs, I did the whole Grand Prix thing at his house out in Iowa. Literally, I stayed at his house for like one night. I guarantee you that place is haunted. It was built in like the 1880s, and like in the middle of the night, there's just weird noises and creaking. And anyways, the point is, I slept in my 4Runner for like 5 nights after that. Awesome dude. House is definitely haunted. Anyways, the Finneys lived there for generations, but with time, sorrow began to creep in. Several family members died within its walls, leaving whispers of grief behind. The wooden floors and brick walls, silent as they seem today, have held more than a century of life, death, and also secrets. The most famous tale tied to the house is about a little girl named Sallie. According to legend, one night a desperate mother brought her little daughter to Dr. Charles Finney, who had lived and worked in the house. It's pretty common back then that doctors just lived in the houses they worked out of. Pretty standard. Anyways, the girl's stomach pain was said to be appendicitis, and the doctor tried to operate, but he made a fatal mistake. Without enough anesthesia, the child screamed in terror as the surgery began, and died in agony on the table. The story spread quickly through the town. To many, it explained these strange happenings in the house. People said the child's ghost remained there, still crying for help, still trapped in the moment of her death. They called her Sallie. But when researchers searched for the truth, the story began to untangle. There are no historical records of a girl named Sallie dying in that house. No reports of such a patient. Nothing official was ever concluded. Was this just a piece of folklore that grew over time, a story people invented to explain the unexplained, or did the doctor really just hide that he did this? It's really hard to say. If Sallie never existed, then what exactly could be haunting the house? Could it be the restless spirits of the Finney family, or something far older, something not human at all, taking on the form of a child to lower defenses and gain trust? The question remains at the heart of this mystery, setting the stage for the terrifying events that were yet to come. By the early 1990s, the house was quiet again, at least on the surface. Then a young couple, Deborah and Tony Pickman, moved in. They were newly married, full of hope, and expecting their first child. Deborah was curious and open-minded, someone who found the idea of the paranormal quite exciting. Tony, however, was different. Raised Catholic, he had no interest in ghosts or hauntings. He wanted nothing more than a peaceful home for his growing family. At first, the house welcomed them with silence, but soon, small things began to stir. The lights flickered and dimmed without any clear reason, almost as if the house itself were breathing in shallow gasps. The chains of the ceiling fans shifted back and forth, though the air remained perfectly still. Tony had the wiring checked, and even professional electricians came out, but they found no fault in the system. This would leave more questions than answers. Some people argued that such incidents were nothing more than quirks of old houses, loose wires, settling structures, or subtle drafts that played tricks on the senses, or Junkyard Diggs' house being definitely haunted. Yet others pointed out to these same patterns, and they'd really been described in countless haunted locations across the world. In places like Amityville House or Borley Rectory, witnesses also spoke of lights behaving strangely, as though the environment itself had turned against its residents. Perhaps this was simply human imagination under stress, but another view suggested it might reveal forces that modern science had not yet learned to record or explain. The strangest part came when their baby arrived. In the nursery, the child's sleep was always restless, interrupted by cries in the night. But when moved to another room, the baby slept peacefully. Although, just to throw this out there, I always like to kind of throw in some. So my ex-wife actually, she had colic when she was a baby, and Apparently, it was very predictable. It happened at night, and she would sleep for like 45 minutes a night, so obviously her father and mother were losing their mind. So could it have been colic? Possibly. But it also could have been ghosts. Anyways, to Deborah, it seemed like something or someone was trying to get their attention. To Tony, it felt like a warning. For a time, the events were small enough to brush aside, a flicker here, a sound there, but in houses like this, the quiet moments are only the beginning. The Pickmans didn't know it yet, but the shadows of the Sallie House were about to reach further into their lives and into Tony's soul. At first, the strange events seemed harmless, but then came the night that changed everything. In the middle of the nursery floor, 3 of the baby stuffed animals were sitting straight up, arranged in a perfect circle. The light above it glowed, even though Tony and Deborah had just turned it off. Deborah was certain she hadn't touched the toys. They placed the animals back on the shelf, switched off the light again, and then walked downstairs. But before they even reached the last step, the light clicked back on. Their hearts raced as they ran back up the stairs. The toys were no longer on the shelves. They were back in the same circle, waiting in the center of the room, just as before. For the Pickmans, this moment was different. This was not a creak in the wood or a draft moving curtains. This was something deliberate, something that seemed to want to be seen. Some families in other haunted homes have told similar stories: dolls that move on their own, chairs that slide across floors, objects that return to the same spot no matter how many times they are put away. Skeptics might call it tired eyes or faulty memories, especially if your offspring is crying the entire night and not getting much sleep, then probably you aren't getting sleep either. Hallucinations run rampant at that point. I think you have like 2 or 3 days before you start hallucinating. But for Tony and Deborah, the toys were a sign that whatever was in their house was not just watching them, it was playing with them. And their dog noticed it too. The animal refused to cross into the nursery, planting its paws firmly at the doorway. Many nights, it would bark and growl at the empty air, eyes locked onto something unseen. Whatever was inside that room, the dog wanted no part of it. Soon, the disturbances left the nursery and then spread through the rest of the house. At night, Tony often heard footsteps moving quickly up and down the stairs. At first, he just assumed it was their cats, which if you have any cats, you know they destroy your house in the middle of the night, but you don't want to get up and deal with it. The sound was light and quick, the way small paws might tap across the floor. One evening, he waited by the stairwell, hoping to catch them in the act, but the cats were nowhere to be found, and even if you did catch them in the act, it's not like it does anything. They will do the exact same thing later, because they do not put together, they're not supposed to be on the counter. Instead, he felt a sudden draft of cold air move across him. A moment later, a new sound followed, children's laughter, faint at first, then carrying softly through the house. The house no longer felt curious or playful. It felt alive, and it was only just the beginning to show the Pickmans how far it could actually go. One afternoon, something rather unsettling would happen to the family. Tony was resting on the couch, half asleep. Without warning, he sat up and in a voice that did not sound like his own, told Deborah that someone was his. Before he could respond, he lay back down as if nothing had happened. She tried to believe it was only just a dream, but the words stayed with her. Who was this someone? And why did it feel as though Tony had not been the one speaking? The house didn't stop there. Soon, family photos hanging on the wall were found upside down, their frames tilted and the glass cracked. On another night, Deborah found a candle that had softened and warped inside of its wrapper. What caught her eye was the impression in the wax itself. It resembled the outline of tiny fingers, pressed deep as if something hot had pushed down from the outside. Strangely, the wick had never been burned. Then came the fires. They were not wild, raging flames, but quick, targeted bursts that seemed to appear from nowhere. A doll was found with its insides burned out, the damage spreading from inside to the outside as if it was lit on fire from its core. Other objects showed the same strange pattern, specific, selective burns that defied reason. The Pickmans began to understand that this was not just a haunting, it was something intelligent, something with purpose, and it was only getting stronger. Word of the strange events inside the house soon spread beyond Atchison. The television crew from a show actually would arrive, eager to see if the stories were actually real. At first, they kept the Pickmans' names hidden. The investigators were cautious, maybe even a little skeptical, but the longer that they stayed there, the more they saw, and each time they returned, the evidence pulled them deeper into the mystery. Their cameras captured things that should not have been possible. Small fires appeared and then vanished within seconds. Objects shifted when no one was actually near them. And most disturbingly of all, scratches appeared on Tony's body while the crew stood only a few feet away, watching it actually unfold. Red welts rose across his skin in real time, forming fresh marks before their eyes. To understand what they were facing, the crew actually brought in a psychic medium named Peter James. Inside the house, he paused at the top of the stairs and then called out gently, "There's a little girl here, Sally. Is your name Sally?" The name stuck. Deborah felt an unexpected wave of comfort. She wanted to believe that a lonely child's spirit only wished to protect their baby. She even began to speak of Sally with care, as if she were a part of the family. Do you want demonic spirits? I guess demons aren't really spirit. Do you want demons? Because that's how you get demons. But Tony could not share the comfort. For him, the house grew darker. He was bitten, clawed, and shoved. Each attack left him weaker, more afraid, and more certain that whatever wore the mask of a little girl did not want to protect him. It wanted to break him. The longer Tony stayed in that house, the more he felt its eyes upon him. It began with fleeting glimpses, shadows that seemed to move when no one else noticed. One night, he looked toward the basement door and froze. Standing there was a little girl. She did not speak. She only watched, silent and still. When Tony blinked, she was gone. Another time, he saw a woman at the top of the stairs. For a breathless moment, he thought it was Deborah until he noticed the old-fashioned maid's outfit. He called her name, but the figure melted into nothing before he reached her. The visions did not stop there. In the corners of the rooms, Tony saw an older woman dressed all in black, her face hidden. Once, a swirl of dust seemed to lift from the floor and take the shape of a person, fading just as quickly as it formed. But the nights were worse. Which, I'm gonna tell you, nights are always worse when it comes to anything. Tony would wake unable to move. His chest felt heavy, as if invisible hands pressed down on him. From the dark, an apparition leaned close and wrapped cold fingers around his throat. He gasped, but no sound came out. Then came the most terrifying change. The childlike figure he once saw would shift before his eyes. Her sweet face twisted, skin graying, eyes hollow. Worms and rot seemed to crawl across her body as she stepped towards him. What had looked innocent was now monstrous. Tony realized the truth. Whatever lived in that house was not a lost little girl. It was something else, something wearing her as a mask. The haunting would become harder to ignore when Tony's own skin turned into a canvas for something unseen. In front of the investigators, as previously mentioned, fresh red lines began to rise across his arms and chest. They were not slow, fading marks. They appeared in real time, one after another, like invisible claws dragging through his flesh. The room always fell silent when it happened. Deborah would gasp, the investigators froze, and Tony clenched his teeth as the pain cut across him. Cameras caught the entire thing. This was not a rumor, it was there, written on his body. At first, the scratches just were random, jagged and wild, but then, one day, they took shape. Letters carved themselves into Tony's skin. The initials were clear, MC. The investigators searched for old records. The name matched someone tied to the house, Michael C. Finney, the man who had built it generations earlier. Why his name? Why now? No one could really answer. For Tony, the messages were far worse than the mystery. It meant the house knew him, marked him, and wanted him to suffer. Every new welt told him that the haunting was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was reaching out, burning its presence into his very skin. By now, the house was not only scratching Tony's skin, it was digging into his mind. At night, he began to hear voices whispering through the walls. They weren't soft, comforting words. They were dark commands, pushing him towards violence. Sometimes they told him to hurt Deborah. Sometimes the images came in his dreams, nightmares where he held a knife, stabbing the woman he loved. He would then wake up shaking, terrified of himself. At this point, I don't know, man, I'm probably just gonna leave. Look at that, rental property, I guess. But the line between dream and waking life grew thinner each day. Tony felt urges he didn't understand. He prayed, he resisted, but the whispers returned again and again, crawling into his thoughts like something alive. And then came the moment that broke everything. One evening, Tony blacked out. When he came to, the family's cat was dead, killed and pinned on the kitchen counter. Tony swore he had no memory of what happened. Deborah's face filled with horror and Tony's own heart filled with guilt that would follow him for the rest of his life. That single act raised a fairly chilling question. Was Tony truly in control, or was something inside of the Sallie House reaching through him, using him and his hands? Investigators debated endlessly, was it possession or slow collapse of a man under unbearable stress? Either way, the house had won another victory. It was no longer just a haunting of rooms and shadows, it was a haunting of the human soul. The house had tested them for months, but the final blow came without warning. One night, as Tony walked past the staircase, an invisible force slammed into him. His body was thrown hard against the wooden rungs, the impact rattling through the house. For a brief, horrifying second, he felt himself lifted towards the banister, as if something wanted to hurl him over the edge. Deborah's scream cut through the moment, her fear no longer brushed aside. She knew then this was not stress, not imagination, this was legitimate danger. After that night, there was no peace. The activity came in unpredictable waves. For days, the house would fall silent, almost as if there was something maybe watching and waiting. And then suddenly, it would turn violent again. Scratches, laughter, moving objects, and shadows darting at the corners of their vision. The Pickmans began to live in constant dread, never knowing what the next hour would bring. Deborah tried to stay strong, hoping that nurturing the so-called spirit of a child might help calm it. Tony, however, grew weaker, his body marked and his mind under siege. And this is when you just straight up get the house blessed and you bring in the Lord on this one. But the couple's love and faith were no longer enough to shield them from this danger. Each step in the house felt heavier, as though the very walls had turned against them. The choice became clear. They could either stay and risk their lives or leave everything behind. Within 3 weeks of Tony's attack on the staircase, the Pickmans made their decision. They walked out of Sallie House permanently. The home still stood on North 2nd Street, but it no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the darkness inside. The story of the Sallie House did not end when the Pickmans walked away, though. Others tried to live there, but the darkness never let them stay for very long. One woman moved in after their departure, but instead of finding a home, she left it in ruins. When she was evicted, investigators discovered strange ritual markings scrawled across the walls and even a pentagram burned into the basement floor. It was as if the house was drawing in not only spirits, but people who carried shadows of their own. The basement quickly became the heart of every investigation. Down there, bricks were missing from the walls, forming a hole that seemed to breathe a heavy, unnatural air. Many who entered claimed the atmosphere shifted the deeper they went, colder, heavier, and more suffocating. Some whispered that the true source of the house's darkness was hidden underneath the floor, sealed away in the earth below. As the legend spread, television crews and paranormal investigators lined up to test the house's reputation. Cameras rolled, recorders clicked on, and time after time, they captured things that defied explanation. Objects moved without touch, fires sparked in impossible places, and the center of it all, the basement loomed like a wound that would never heal. Even Tony and Deborah returned for several of these programs, hoping to finally understand what had tormented them, but each time Tony set foot inside, the house seemed to remember him. Scratches would appear again, burning into his skin in front of stunned investigators. On one visit, he was nearly overcome by a violent force, just as he had been during the haunting years before. Yeah, I'm not really sure I'd go back to that. It became clear that leaving the house had freed the Pickmans, but the house itself was never free. It continued to reach out to lash at anyone who entered, a restless presence trapped within its own walls. Today, the Sallie House is no ordinary house on a quiet street in Atchison, Kansas. It has become one of the most famous haunted destinations in America. Ghost hunters, researchers, and thrill seekers travel from across the world to step inside. They bring cameras, recorders, and high-tech gear, all chasing the same goal: to capture proof of the strange things people say happen within its walls. Over the years, evidence has piled up. Photos show strange shapes and shadows. Videos catch objects moving without touch. EVP recorders, devices that actually capture voices not heard in real time, have picked up whispers of children, cries, and words that no one in the room had spoken. A few years ago, actually, even a podcast known for its careful research set a recorder in the nursery. When they returned, what they captured chilled listeners everywhere. Faint, strange voices calling out from the silence. Many wonder if these devices are catching proof of something real, or if science is just simply not advanced enough yet to explain what they are detecting. Now, as always, there are a couple theories as to what's really going on here. One theory says that the house is haunted by a little girl named Sallie. Clearly, people believe she died tragically, perhaps during the surgery that went wrong. Supporters point to eyewitness accounts of a small girl in an old-fashioned dress, to Tony's drawings that matched a former resident's childhood's imaginary friend, and to the countless recordings of childlike voices. To them, the house is not filled with evil, but with the cries of a lost child who just wants to be remembered. Others argue that the child spirit is only a mask. That's demons. They believe a shape-shifting entity hides behind Sallie's face, luring people in before revealing something far more sinister. The same presence that once looked like a girl also appeared as a maid and an older woman in black, and even the grotesque figure crawling with worms. The scratches that appeared on Tony's skin in front of eyewitnesses, along with his violent urges, seemed to point to something feeding on fear and anger rather than some innocence. Psychology and the house itself skeptics look elsewhere for answers. They say Tony was under heavy stress, working long hours, expecting his first child, and often short on sleep. His waking paralysis, disturbing dreams, and violent impulses could have come from exhaustion or repressed emotions. Deborah's excitement may have added to the pressure, creating a cycle of fear. Others believe the house itself may play a role. Built in the mid-1800s, it could hold an imprint of past pain, as suggested by the stone tape theory. Even natural causes like faulty wiring, mold, or low-frequency sound waves might explain why so many people feel dread inside. And the pentagram painted in the basement years later raises another question. Did rituals performed by tenants add fuel to whatever force had already been there? When evidence is weighed, no single answer really seems complete. The stress on Tony was real, yet the scratches and recordings were also real, seen and heard by others. There's no historical proof of a girl named Sallie ever being there, but stories of visitors remain strangely consistent. Perhaps the truth is part psychology, part folklore, and part something science cannot yet measure. And so, the Sallie House endures. Whether haunted by a lost child, a darker spirit in disguise, or the echoes of history itself, it continues to pull people back, daring them to seek answers. What is certain is that this little white house is no ordinary home. It is a mystery still expanding, one that reminds us that some questions, for now, remain beyond proof. So, as always, I like to break in at the end here. Now, one of the things that I'm kind of picking up from this story in particular is sleep paralysis. So, sleep paralysis, if you've never had it, is absolutely horrifying. I have had several sleep paralysis dreams. Basically, the first one I ever had, I had no idea what was going on, obviously, and then I had an out-of-body experience because of it. I was laying in bed. I had my hand over my eyes. It was probably, I was working American Eagle at the time, so we had to do like the all-night, basically display change, and I got home at like 6 a.m. That's a real thing, by the way. You have to stay up and change everything and then anyways, the whole point is I had a sleep paralysis dream, and what it was is I was stuck, my eyes were open, and then something whispered my voice to me, and then that's when I had like the whole standing up, but I wasn't actually standing up. It was very, very strange. Obviously, it's you're part sleeping and you're part awake. It's your brainstem is still immobilizing your body. I believe it's the GABA receptors have been activated, which calms you down, which is gamma aminobutyric acid. Anyways, the point is that so that you don't act out your dreams, this hormone is released. It essentially inhibits your motor neurons so that you can't move. But when you wake up, the problem is that you're now awake, but you're also still paralyzed. But the other part of it that a lot of people don't talk about is your amygdala actually is more activated when you are dreaming and sleeping. So when you're partially awake and you can see things and you can hear things, you're actually, that fear that you're feeling comes from the fact that your amygdala is activated, which is where fear is basically processed in your brain. And the fact that you can't move is also terrifying. That's why people's heart rates spike. They try to move, they try to yell, they try to scream, and they can't. A lot of people will manifest this as something sitting on their chest or a hand wrapped around their throat. My brain manifested it as something whispering my name to me. Horrifying. But the point is that sticks with you. I was 18. I'm 33 now, so it's been 15 years. I still remember everything about it. And then later, there were other sleep paralysis dreams that I had where one time I was in a hotel, my brother was in the other bed. I woke up, sleep paralysis, the room was dark, yet I was also still in a dreamlike state. So there was something in the corner of the room, it talked to me, and then it was daylight all of a sudden, and then when I finally got released from the sleep paralysis dream, it was back to night. Your brain can make up a lot of weird stuff when you are asleep. Now, to that end, personally, I'm part of the God Squad on this one, and I can't help but notice basically what I would do to kind of stop these things from happening is I would pray, and then it would usually rectify itself. So the point, except for one time when I was in my fraternity house, and there was this really, really good-looking sorority sister. I was sleeping in a sorority house at this point, and I was like, okay, it's not a sleep paralysis demon, it's this sorority sister. And it did turn into the sorority sister. So is it my brain? Is it supernatural? Or is it demons? I don't know. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that if you go back to the American Eagle story, I was exhausted, right? I was just trying to sleep. The sun was coming up. My circadian rhythm was all out of whack. If we take that same concept and we apply it to this guy, his circadian rhythm is also out of whack. Now, the other side of that is there's always this concept that demons like to basically hit you when you're down. If you're depressed, if there's grief, if there's anger, if there's something like that kind of throws you off of your normal frame, then they use that and exploit it to basically possess you, for lack of a better term. So if this guy's already exhausted, the kid being born, working long hours, his sleep's getting thrown off by sleep paralysis, circadian rhythm's not doing hot. The fact is he would be at a low point, right? And if his wife, who just had the kid, who's feeling happy and blah, 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 and also is like, oh, I'm excited about this, then that person's not thrown off of their, I guess, emotional framework. So they're not really as susceptible to being screwed with. So that's kind of, is it this thing actively causing that, or is it just the stress of life allowing this thing to infiltrate your life? It's kind of hard to tell. If we apply just standard biological principles to it, such as immunology, you could get invaded by a pathogen at any point, right? Most of the time, when you're healthy, relaxed, enough sleep, all this good stuff, your immune system can take care of it. It can destroy the pathogen. You don't get sick. However, if you're in a weakened state, then the pathogen can then flourish. Possibly, we don't really necessarily know what happens after we die. We don't know if we have a soul. We don't know 100%, right? It's all based on faith. But I guess that would probably be how it works. And this could maybe be an example of that, where you have somebody who's happy and healthy, so they aren't able to be infiltrated because they're not in a weakened state. Whereas Tony, even though he was not really happy and healthy, he was basically worn out. Now he was able to be infiltrated by something else because he wasn't basically emotionally prepared for it. So is that possible? Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to kind of the gray area where scientifically we know a lot, right? As a species, we now know a lot. We're learning about physics and all this, but there's still so much that we just don't understand in life. For instance, our own universe, right? We consider everything around us, which is composed of matter, to be the standard matter of the universe, right? Well, the reality is what composes us and everything that we see, that's only 5% of the universe's actual mass. What is it, like 27% is composed of dark matter, which we consider that to be abnormal. And then I think it's like 68% or something like that. It's right around there, is essentially dark energy, which is also still part, I guess, of the universe's mass, as they call it. But the point is that we're only 5% of what's out here. So we're not really normal. So all it would really take, and we can't even see dark matter or dark energy in the first place. So I'm not saying it's dark because it's evil. It's just not understood yet. So it's like an entire massive piece of the universe that's out there that we don't even know about yet. And to just assume that nothing could be born out of that, to me, seems a little foolish. So I think, is it possible this place could be haunted? Could it be a demon? Could it be something like that? Yes, it could be. We just don't know. We don't have any way of measuring it. We don't have any way of actually understanding what goes on after we die. Are we just conduits for consciousness? Is there something more? Is this it? Do we just return to the universe? It's really just a massive unknown, and I think that's what scares humanity, but at the same time, that's also what we're continuing to look for. That's why we just keep trying to figure out, okay, well, is there anything out there? That's why I really don't look at, people who, I don't look at paranormal investigators as whack jobs, because they're doing what we're all trying to want to know. They're just doing what we all want to know. What happens when the lights go out, right? We all want to know it. You can take the most pessimistic or apathetic person out there. What do they call them? Nihilists. That's right. So you could take the biggest nihilist out there, and the reality is just because you pretend like you don't care doesn't mean you don't care. Now, don't get me wrong, you get older, it scares you maybe a little less. I know when I was in my 20s, I had this big preoccupation with wow, I'm gonna die. And now that I'm in my 30s, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna die, but I can't imagine when I'm gonna be at 80. I'm probably holy God, get me out of here. But the point is that hopefully I live to be 80. But the point is, it's human nature to want to learn this stuff, but it's also human nature to attribute standard things to possibly we assign it a supernatural category. We've done that since the beginning. It's what we are. So, like I said, could it be haunted? It is possible. It is possible that it's just a demon. I mean, just a demon. I wouldn't want to deal with one of those things. But then if it is a demon, all you got to do is just bring the Lord into the situation, and I'm pretty sure it gets smited by Archangel Michael, because again, if demons exist, then so do angels, and they're kind of the antithesis of each other, so why not just let that fight happen while you live in the house? That's all I'm saying. But this is another place I think I need. So far, I think we're at Billy Creek. I got to go to Huska Castle when I go over to Europe, and I think now I'm going out to the Pacific Northwest. I could stop in Atchison, Kansas, and just see what that's about. So I got a lot of stuff I gotta do. I don't know. This channel might take on a completely different thing here pretty soon, which will be the third time that this channel has been changed, which will be hilarious. I still am gonna cover these, obviously, but Maybe occasionally I'll do like an on-site type of thing. I don't know really how I would structure that, but if you guys have some ideas, let me know. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like as it helps get the video out there. And subscribing is a great way to stay up to date when I post. It seems like the channel is finally catching traction, so I do appreciate you guys supporting this. It has been awesome seeing it grow. And, now I'm actually uploading weekly rather than like uploading weekly like 6 times and then being like, oh, I'm going to take a 3-month break. Not going to do that again. So this is pretty much standard at this point of what we're doing. But I would also like to thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Monkey Man, Scrungle, and Invictus Echo. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga, Dragon Master Knight, and Hope Blighton. Thank you guys as well. At the First-Hand Accounts tier, we have the Soggy Anglerfish. And at the Second-Hand Accounts tier, we have Troy, Fred Rush, Stutz, Bianca, and Pouches. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's awesome support. It goes a long way towards helping out, so thank you. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.